Come on. Matt's going to talk about ancient Greek religion. I'll focus.
Alrighty. So, yes, my topic was about the ancient Greek religion, which I found particularly interesting. So, to sum it up, according to the book, the religion of ancient Greece had no creed, and although certain actions were irreligious and therefore generally condemned as displeasing to the supernatural powers, there is nothing like a code or system of morality which must be accepted by everyone who worshipped Athena or Zeus. So basically what that means is that, for example, in Christianity, there's kind of like a moral code that everybody's expected to follow. But the Greeks kind of thought of their religion as a different way. Like, everyone believed that the gods existed and believed that the gods had power, but a lot of people had different ways of worshiping these gods and following their ways. So it was different than a lot of other religions in that regard. And it was also a big part of everyday life. So like a lot of what the Greeks did during the day, they attributed to the gods. So say they had a good harvest that particular day, they would credit that to the gods as something. I guess if they're just having a good day for they asked their crush out and she said yes, they would attribute that to the gods. So that was a big part of their life. So the origins of their religion, a lot of what the Greeks believed started during the epic age of Homer, and a lot of the stories he told, such as the Iliad or the Odyssey, a lot of those were the basis for a lot of Greeks' beliefs. So not only did Homer himself have a great influence on the literary culture of Greece, but he had a massive influence on the religious culture of Greece as well. And so the stories that he told the stories of gods and different heroes, many people believed in those and it seemed reasonable to them. So, the gods. Obviously, the gods were a huge part of the Greek culture. So the Greek gods, they were thought to be anthropomorphic, immortal beings. So they basically had the shape of humans, but they were immortal, so they were ageless and deathless. But they could also transform into any shape that they wanted to, so they weren't just confined to the human character. And each of the gods controlled an important aspect of the world, which I'll kind of touch on later about what each of them did. And it was believed that they lived in a divine society called Mount Olympus, which the people considered to be the highest layer of all their social systems. And there were 12 major Olympians, so there were 12 main gods essentially, but there was also dozens, if not hundreds, of minor gods that were thought to control the more minor aspects of the world. So, the major gods. Well, the 12 major ones consisted of Zeus, Hera, Poseidon, Apollo, Artemis, Athena, Hermes, Ares, Aphrodite, Demeter, Dionysius, and Hephaestus. I think that's how you pronounce that. Those were the 12 main Olympians. They were thought to control the more important aspects of the world. But I'm not going to go over every single one, so I'll just go over the main ones. Zeus, he was the king of all the gods. He was the ruler of the sky and controller of weather. He was thought not just to be the king of gods, but kind of like a father figure to all the gods and all the people as well. Hera, she was the wife of Zeus. She was considered the goddess of marriage and was generally associated with women in general. And another major god was Poseidon. He was the brother of Zeus, ruler of the seas, earthquakes, and horses, which all were very important in Greek culture. Another important one that I didn't mention was Athena. The Greeks, especially the Athenians, loved her for obvious reasons. They named her city after her. She was the goddess of wisdom and battle, and the Greeks prided themselves a lot on that. All right, so the heroes and demigods also, they also played a large role in the Greek religion. So the Odyssey, which was written by Homer, it tells of amazing heroes like Achilles, Hector, and Odysseus. They're some of the more famous ones. And many of these heroes, they were thought to be demigods, which was half god and half human. And the logic behind that is that the gods would come down from Mount Olympus essentially hook up with mortal women or mortal men, and they would have children together. And these children would be the demigods, and they were thought to possess like either great powers or great strength. So one of the more famous ones that everyone's heard of is Hercules. He was known as the son of Zeus, and he was famous for possessing godlike strength. He could lift boulders and probably even mountains. Yeah. So the picture right there, those are two of the more famous demigods. The dude holding the club, that was Hercules. And the dude on the right, that was Perseus. He was famous for killing Medusa by cutting her head off.
Who was famous for slaying the Minotaur?
That's also true.
I mean, who? I said who was.
Oh, who was? I believe it was... Oh, what was his name? I know this. Was it Perseus? It might have been. I don't know. Maybe, I think it was Perseus, actually. Anyway, so, the afterlife. So, every religion kind of has their own idea of the afterlife. Some have even like borrowed ideas from others. The Greeks believed in an underworld, which was ruled by Hades, who he wasn't considered one of the main Olympians because he didn't live up on Mount Olympus with everybody else, but he was the brother of Zeus and Poseidon, so he was still a major god. But yeah, he was the king of the underworld, and burial was a very important part of the Greek religion and culture, because they believed that if a person wasn't properly buried, it would kind of not help them at all on their journey to the afterlife. And they believed that upon death, a person's soul would leave their body and be transported to the gates of the underworld, where it was determined which section of the underworld that they would go to. And there were 3 main sections of the underworld. There was a couple other subsections I didn't consider that important. But the 3 main ones was Tartarus, I believe that's how you pronounce it. That's where it was the worst of the worst were sent. Like whether it was a deity or a regular person, but the worst people were sent to here.
And often put on fish.
Yeah. The next kind of layer was oh boy, I think it's pronounced Asphodel Meadows. Mm-hmm. Those were kind of like that was kind of where the 95% of people were sent. That place was safe for ordinary, indifferent people who kind of just lived normal lives. And the higher, I guess, class would be sent to Elysium. It was saved for exceptional and distinguished people who accomplished great deeds or did great things throughout their lives. And this place was thought to kind of be like paradise, and this is where people strive to go. I also want to mention that there was another place called the Isles of the Blessed. What this was, so if someone was sent to Elysium, they had the option to be reborn into a life again. And if they did that twice, so if they lived 3 lives and achieved Elysium all 3 times, they would be sent to the Isles of the Blessed, which was considered, I guess, the ultimate honor, the ultimate party spot.
So let's go for it.
Yeah. But it was very rare because most people never even made it to, it was thought that most people never even made it to Elysium once, let alone doing it 3 times. But the Greeks believed it was possible. All right. Another important time period that kind of revolved around religion was the Archaic period. And it was during this time when the first Greek temples were beginning to be built. And when I mentioned earlier that everyone believed in the gods, but they kind of had different ways of worshiping them, this kind of refers to some of the cults that formed around the gods. So when some of these first temples were made, cults would start to hang out a lot around these temples. And these cults, they would kind of pick one god in particular and to focus on and do a lot of weird stuff for, honestly. So it could be like a cult of Ares or there's a cult of Dionysius too, I believe. And so as far as the temples go, though, there were many sacrifices and offerings. So these offerings could be anything from like a bag of gold coins to slaughtering a goat, for example. And it was thought that these actions would bring favor from the gods and aided everyone in their lives. There were also festivals throughout the year, and in the fall it was in honor of Demeter, who was the goddess of the harvest, and Dionysius was a god of wine. Zeus was celebrated in the last month of the year. So yeah, just to recap, the gods were tightly intertwined in Greek society. Each of them controlled a portion of the Greek culture. But historical figures such as Homer and others, they actually played a role in the religion themselves. And so even though the ideas of the Greek religion kind of remained generally the same throughout the time of the Greeks, it was still kind of evolved and changed over time as well. Yeah.
Any questions?
Yeah.
Was the underworld, like just the underworld itself, kind of, you know, almost similar to the idea of purgatory or something?
I think the idea of purgatory was more the asphodel fields that I mentioned, because that's kind of just where you're stuck there. You're not doing anything good. You're not doing anything bad. I would assume that like the idea of Tartarus is more equated with our idea of hell, and Elysium is more equated with our idea of heaven. But yeah.
I thought Olympus was.
Yeah, well, Olympus is where the gods lived. It's not where people
All right, well, we will continue on next time. Thank you.